So we've already discussed today that Donald Trump's actions on just about every issue, everything we see him do publicly, it's motivated at least partially by, does it hurt him in November or does it help him in November? That's the lens through which all of these decisions are being made about carrying his mask around, about canceling the huge event of the Republican National Convention. All of this stuff is just what's the calculus in terms of how it affects my election. When it comes to vote by mail, we just received some stunning new polling data from Emerson Polling. And if this data doesn't convince you that Trump knows exactly what he's doing by opposing vote by mail and confusing vote by mail with absentee voting as if they're two different things, this data should convince you that he knows exactly what he is doing. Poll subjects were asked in this Emerson Polling survey who they support, Trump versus Biden, and grouped by whether they plan to vote in person or vote by mail. Of those who plan to vote in person, 65% support Trump and only 32% support Joe Biden. Of those who plan to vote absentee, 76% support Joe Biden and only 20% support Donald Trump. So put it a different way. Trump leads 2-1 among voters planning to vote in person, and Biden leads almost 4-1 among people planning to vote by mail. This is why Trump opposes vote by mail. Now, the thing to understand is that this split between in-person versus vote by mail is not partisan per se. It's health related. Let me explain what I mean. We know from other polling that Republicans are roughly half as likely as Democrats to wear masks all the time when they leave their house. I think it was something like roughly 66-33, or, 66% of Democrats were wearing a mask all the time outside their house, only 33% of Republicans, or something like that. What this means is Democrats are taking the pandemic more seriously. The reason that Biden supporters are way more likely to vote by mail is they are taking the risk of catching coronavirus more seriously than Republicans. Now, you could come in and say, well, if there's more vote by mail open, more Trump supporters will vote by mail. If there's less vote by mail open, Biden supporters will just go and vote in person. It's all going to shake out evenly. That's exactly the wrong approach. That is exactly the mistake that's being made in analyzing this. Biden voters are more likely not to vote at all if they can't do it safely, while Trump voters are more likely to vote in person if that's available, if that's all that's available. So sure, most Biden voters planning to vote by mail, if they are told you can't vote by mail, they'll put a mask on. They understand the importance. They'll go and take the risk because they understand the importance of the election. But if you believe, as is probably the case, that there are some Biden supporters who might not vote at all if they can't vote absentee, you then try to stop vote by mail altogether, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Imagine that if you take some state that could be close and you restrict, cancel, or stop vote by mail, and it dissuades just 3% of the total electorate from voting. And imagine that in that 3% who will say, if I can't vote by mail, I'm not voting at all. Imagine that 80% of that slice would have voted for Biden and 20% of that slice would have voted for Donald Trump. That can flip a state. That it literally is enough to flip a state. Let's look at Wisconsin in 2016. Now, Trump won Wisconsin in 2016 very narrowly. Trump won by about 22,000 votes in 2016 in Wisconsin. If you dissuade 3% from voting, that's about 83,000 people that you would dissuade from voting, maybe if you say you have to come in person. If 80% of those dissuaded are Biden supporters and 20% of those dissuaded are Trump supporters, canceling vote by mail grows Trump's victory by 50,000 votes. Now, the margin was only 22,000. So understand how a small portion of the electorate, if it is mostly Biden supporters being dissuaded from voting, could flip or put a state out of reach. Now, this is a hypothetical example with hypothetical numbers. The point is, blocking vote by mail, even if it affects a small percentage of total voters, based on this data, it would disproportionately hit Biden supporters and it could turn a state. So when you combine trying to prevent vote by mail with kneecapping the post office, which is what Donald Trump is doing right now by having selected one of his donors to be postmaster general, you can actually turn states. And that's why, when we see, okay, one poll has Biden winning by 15%, it's not going to be 15%. Another poll has Biden winning by 10, but when you account for the margin of error, it might only be 6. If that 6 becomes 3 or 4 by election day, if you strategically slow down the mail in some states and stop vote by mail in other states, a 3 or 4% popular vote victory for Joe Biden might not be enough to actually win electorally. With Hillary, we know 2.2 or 2.8, 2.2 as a popular vote win was not enough to win electorally because of 77,000 votes in 3 states. We could see that again. And this is why anybody who's looking at the polling and saying, we got this, Biden's up 15. Biden might only be up 6 or 5 when you account for the margins of error. And that could very quickly become an electoral college loss because of exactly this stuff. Do not become complacent is the message. We will continue our coverage of this on the David Pakman Show Instagram page at David Pakman Show. Follow me on Instagram for my latest Argentinian food delivery from this weekend. Got some really great stuff. Empanadas, of course, empanadas. I'm David.Pakman on Instagram. We'll take a quick break and be right back.